is the sewing machine 101. I'm going to take your name so that we can put you in the database as having gone through the demonstration. Because that's why you're here, right?
Yes.
And feel free to move closer also if you can't see very well, because it's not exactly something that's it's detailed. Sometimes you have to have a good
You go ahead and just move all my crap over there.
Okay. Please write your name under the dotted line. Just kidding, it's not a dotted line. Okay, so do any of you have any experience at all with a sewing machine?
No.
I do. You have a little bit? Obviously, John.
Hi.
Okay.
I completely made this backpack on that machine.
Oh
She
my
did.
god. This machine is a bitch.
Bye. Drive safe. Stay warm. Yeah, so a little background on this baby. It was $80 at Walmart. So it's not exactly a super high quality machine, unfortunately. But it gets the job done, and if you're patient and you go slow and you don't, punch it like I have in frustration, it should give you no problems. So,
Sweet talk it.
You really
Yes.
have to.
yes. Oh, this bobbin's already wound. Damn.
So we have our
I'll
little.
just
Add
wind
more.
over it. I'll wind over it. Okay, so basic background on a sewing machine.
Fold over and act like we're gonna sew it.
We have the needle. And machine needles are different than hand sewing needles. So if this needle breaks or gets dull, you can't just put any Joe Schmo needle in there. You have to get specialty machine grade needles. Usually they come specialty for the machine. This is a Singer product, so they mass produce Singer noodles. Wow,
Noodles?
I'm hungry. Singer needles. And it's not very hard to uninstall, but if that ever happens, just ask me or one of the officers and we'll be able to change it out for you. No sweat. That little doohickey is the foot, which you always want to remember to put down when you're sewing. Do not be me at my first con when I was sewing my Noel Vermilion costume and I forgot to put the foot down. And I sewed an entire shirt without the foot on. Always put the foot down. It just holds your fabric in place, make sure it doesn't slip around, and keeps the
It helps
thread
inch
in
it forward.
Yeah.
keeps the thread going straight forward. This here is the bobbin chamber. This is a bobbin.
Fold it so that the rise
As
is
you
stuck
all
together.
know, sewing machines use two lines of thread, a top thread and a lower thread. Your top thread is going to be just your basic, thread spool that you get from Joann's or Hancock Fabrics or anywhere else that sells thread.
With the whip
Note to
stitch,
the
all
wise,
you
do
is
not go to Walgreens for
take
thread.
your
They have
camera,
really,
start
really
it.
bad thread. Trust me, I
So you're
know.
not on the top.
It was like 2 a.m. and I
Just
needed
take
a
it,
quick
don't even
fix. I went to
bother going back
Walgreens
up
for thread.
through,
Never
just
again.
go right back down
Okay.
again.
This is the bobbin case
You wanna keep
cover.
these stitches
Before you start
fairly
sewing,
close
make
together.
sure you reload the
They
cover
tend to
into
do
the bobbin
some
case,
weird
otherwise you
stuff.
will have issues and the bobbin probably won't work properly.
Too far apart.
So the first thing that you guys are going to learn today is how to wind a bobbin. This one's technically already wound, but we're going to pretend it's not.
You can wind over bobbins.
Yeah, you can wind over them. I don't like to because then I forget that it has more than one color and it messes up my costume eventually because it just starts another color. And
Whip
So the
stitches are
first
really
thing you
good
do-
for repairing quick fixes, stuff
Oh,
like that, you don't have a lot
yeah.
of time,
So
you
this
wanna
is the
spend on
bobbin,
something.
like spool thingy.
Um,
It goes in and
it's
out
just really
like
quick
so.
and fast.
To install
So
it,
it looks kinda like this.
that's its normal resting position. To install it, you're going to want to
Other
push
way
it to the
around,
left.
actually.
Oh,
the
yeah,
next thing we're
that's
gonna
the
work
resting
on
position.
is your
Oh,
basic stitch.
yeah.
That's the up,
Well, you're just
down,
going to make sure
type
that the
stuff.
spool's
So
on the
up
left
into
when you
down,
insert the bobbin, like
down,
so.
you-
And then when you're going to wind it, you're going to want to move it to the right
This is more of what a sewing
because
machine
this
does.
keeps the thread in place and
Just
keeps
goes
the
up and
thread
down.
going smoothly into the bobbin. And this is your thread spool.
It's a pretty
Stick your
big
thread on there
stitch.
like so.
This you see
bobbin,
more,
spool.
with people
Any questions about the
traditionally
first
doing
step?
sewing without a sewing machine is
Pretty
now
basic.
sit here
Okay.
and do
So
this.
to wind it,
The tighter
you take your
stitches
thread
are, the better
spool,
it's gonna hold.
and every sewing machine is different at this
And by
step.
tighter, I mean the
This is
smaller,
just
closer
how to do it on
together
this
they are.
machine. On a different
The
machine, it's
longer
probably
and
going to have
wider they
different
are, the
instructions.
looser your
But for this
fabrics are.
machine, you take it
So it does
and you
take a
put
lot
it,
of time,
does everyone see
but if you're
what I'm
doing a
doing
really
here?
small
You
project,
put it
little, like, tiny, small
in this
parts
little
that
notch,
sewing machines
yep.
really can't get.
And then,
Especially
so the
like
first step
small
is putting it
touch
through the
stuff.
notch here like so. Second step is winding it around this little
The
round
second-
thing.
third one we'll work on
so that it makes kind of like an X, like the two layers of the thread cross over each other. And then usually it's easier to take the bobbin out for this part. You see, everyone see that little hole?
Yep.
There's one on both sides. It doesn't matter which side you do, it just matters which way the bobbin is loaded. You're going to want to take the thread and put it through that little hole, which can be kind of a painstaking process, but you get used to it. And then make sure that you push the bobbin back onto the loader. And then what you're going to want to do, you take your handy foot pedal and you press it. And then it winds your bobbin. Why is this being finicky?
Because it's underneath.
Oh yeah.
Oh shit.
You gotta make sure of that.
One
Don't do
good
what I just did and let it wildly run its course.
one good tip to keep in mind. Oh, that's yep. One good tip to keep in mind is to hold it tight.
Let me look at it.
This machine is finicky.
Try again.
Could be the tension.
Oh, I see what's going on. This was moved over, so I was thinking that it was already done.
Oh,
So you move that to where you want your thread amount to be.
important detail. And you can wind as much thread as you need. You don't have to wind the entire bobbin spool every time. But if you're working on a really big project like an entire skirt, an entire dress, probably will be in your best interest just to wind the entire bobbin so you don't run out halfway through and then you have to rewind your bobbin, and that can be frustrating. And then when it is adequately wound,
Can I give one tip
Yeah.
about this? When you wind it, you want to be able to press on the bobbin itself, the thread, and make it so it's not very springy. Because that, if it's very springy, when it's in here, it's going to have a lot more. It's going to be a lot more loose, which will make it a lot easier to like bunch up in there and nest, which can be a real pain in the butt when you are
and then
trying to work on.
it's all
Yeah, so see how this is kind of like nice and tightly wound? That's what you want.
you can pass it around too so everyone can feel what that feels like.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a scissors handy, there's a little razor on the side of the machine.
Teeny
So
tiny baby.
you can just go boop and then it's cut. So I'll pass the bobbin around and you can press on it and see what Jenna's talking about. With tension.
If we had the one that was on that before, we could show you what a not very
Oh yeah. that.
wound bobbin is. If you can like push it and push like the
It'll
the
just
thread
it'll be a lot
in.
more squishy and like loose.
Actually, no, it's called a ladder stitch.
Yeah,
That's what it's called.
that's not what you want.
So you're gonna start
And for those of you unfamiliar with the term nesting, it's basically when all the thread bunches up underneath your fabric
Yep.
and it just starts jamming everything up.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and it looks really bad too.
Mm.
So people can see your seams and they see it's nested and it's all a big mess.
Well, then it just wastes a lot of fabric.
Yeah.
A lot of thread.
All in all, not a good thing. Oh, did you get the little? Where's my little notepad
Oh, it's
for names?
right
It's
Yeah,
right here.
she's, she's
Okay,
signed
you
it.
put your name on it.
No, that's
Mhm,
good.
cool, because you came a couple minutes
I
after
saw
I
that.
think. So
I knew the back.
What that's gonna do
That's
is it's
okay.
gonna bring these two
Okay,
stitches together.
so now we're going to talk about actually threading the machine so that you can begin sewing the garment. So for threading the machine, the top spool now goes on to the bottom
I've
spool.
never seen it go on there.
That's how I always do it.
Really?
Yeah.
Hmm.
I guess it doesn't really matter. My personal preference is putting it on the bobbin spool. I don't know why.
Does that
You can keep
spin
them
when you
loose
do
to
that
begin
though?
with, but then start
No,
making them tighter,
well-
so that they start to pucker
We'll put it on this one for now.
Oh, don't you?
I have weird sewing habits. Okay.
Here, I'm just
So
gonna move over.
if you observe this little notch
Sorry.
again that we use to thread the bobbin, the way that we're going to thread the top thread is taking our thread, putting it down into the notch like so. You're going to want to make sure that the needle is aligned in the top position, and the way to do that is if we observe this knob here.
Giving you,
See how when I move the knob it moves the needle?
that you see in clothing a lot.
You're going to want to make sure the needle's in the top position. And the easy way to tell that is this little hook in here. You see the little silver thing at the top?
And you want to just
That is the needle hook. So when it's fully in the top position, like right now it's not, now it is.
to get in there.
You're going to want to make sure that it's at the top of your little notch thingy here. Really official terms in Cosplay Club, notch thingy. So then you just follow the pattern of the notch. You make sure that the thread goes inside this little hook here. Can everyone see? See the little hook? You're going to go wee like that. Make sure it goes down in the hook. And then you put it in the thread guide like so. And now the tricky part is actually threading the needle because it's very tiny and it can be a frustrating process.
So out of all these stitches I've ever used,
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
stitch is the one
Yeah, it's very
There's
small.
there's no good way to do this, I don't think.
I
I feel like I need a magnifying glass.
Yeah, it's a really tiny needle. Naito, do you want to go and grab me a scissors because the end is frayed?
Does anybody have scissors, by the way?
Jace has scissors.
Lolo,
Okay, I'll
can
try
you
to.
help grab scissors, please?
I need scissors.
Threaders?
You can. You can.
Does it help?
In my experience, it has helped. So if you have one and you know how to use one, highly do recommend. One tip for threading the needle, do you guys see how that thread is really frayed?
Yeah.
That makes it really hard to put the thread into the eye of the needle because it's really small. So rather than using the razor, I usually just cut with the scissor, and that makes it a lot cleaner and easier to put in the eye of the needle.
It was a low sound cock.
There it is.
Hey.
It's a delicate process.
It is a delicate process. And you're always going to want to make sure that you have some inch leeway with the threads because you don't want it to be too short because then the machine has a higher risk of unthreading while you're sewing, which is really frustrating.
Where's that?
And now we're going to load the bobbin. Yeah, I'm going to cut that out because that'll mess up everything.
Yeah, I don't know.
This is another reason why I don't like to load on top of other thread because you have a lot of different thread ends sticking out. So loading the bobbin is a little bit tricky at first. You're going to want to make sure that you have your bobbin in this position with the thread hanging off your left side. It's my left. So when you're looking at it, it's going to be the left side. And what you're going to want to do is if you observe the bobbin case here, see that there's a little notch in there in the metal, right by my finger.
Yeah.
You load the bobbin in, and you make sure the thread goes underneath the little notch when you pull it out. You don't want to have it like that hanging out the notch because then it's not going to catch the thread, the top thread, and you're going to have a lot of problems. Like so. And then excess thread, like always, to prevent the risk of unthreading. And then you just slide the bobbin cover on until it snaps into place. And then you have your machine loaded, and you're almost ready to begin sewing, but there's one more step. It's kind of tricky. You have to make sure that the bottom thread gets caught by the needle. So the way that I do that is I hold the threads taut like so, and then I take my right hand and use the knob going down. And then you want to pull up, and you see how it's looped around like so.
Don't actually cut it.
Yeah, don't actually cut it, but it's easier to get the thread out of the bobbin case like that. And then it just makes sure that the lower thread is on top of the foot. That means that the bottom thread is actually caught, and it will sew. If you don't do this step, you're only going to get a top stitch, and you're not going to have a bottom thread, which won't efficiently hold your fabric together. And your costume will be a lot less, it just won't stay together. So that's a really important step. So for your learning purposes, I have a wonderful little mini vest to practice on. And the basic, okay, for those of you who don't have any experience with sewing, the way that we do this when we're sewing a garment is you always sew your garment inside out. So right now, this is the inside of the garment, and this is where the seams are going to go, so that when I'm done sewing and I open it, you're not going to see the seam. It's just going to look like the fabric is together. So the seam's going to run right there, and then it's going to look like that when I'm done. So you always sew on the inside of your fabric because it just looks a lot cleaner and nicer.
It also goes for making sure you mark things on the inside part of your fabric.
Yep, when you're cutting your fabric and you accidentally mark on the outside.
Yeah, I've done that very many times.
So, first step, raise the foot so you can actually get your thread, or not your thread, your fabric in there. You're going to want to put your fabric corner right underneath the needle, and then you put the foot down. Really important step. Up position, down position. Now, before I begin, I want to show you guys this side here. This lever knob thingy here. It's like a, I guess it's like a key, I guess. This is the back stitch button. Whenever you begin or end a garment, you're going to want to back stitch because it holds the thread more securely in place. And you don't have to do it for very long as you just back stitch like an inch at the start and end of each of your like seams. Just make sure that the thread will stay in there and it'll hold the garment together.
Okay, so instead of knotting, this is what you do.
Yeah, that's what you do on a sewing machine. Or on this particular machine. Every machine is different, but same basic concept. And now you're ready to actually sew, which is probably the simplest part of this entire process. So you have your foot down. So I sewed about 1/2 inch there. Now I'm going to press the notch and backstitch. And as long as you have a steady hand and you feed your fabric in slowly, it should sew in a pretty straight line.
Have faith in yourself.
Have faith. Okay, so now I'm at the end of the seam. So I'm going to do the back stitch button again. And sew for about another inch and then complete it.